We're here today to have an opportunity to hear from two people who are running for the school board, Nancy Pearson, who has been on the board, and we have Jim Needham, who will be running for the board and joining the board. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Schaps about the budget. What I'm going to do now is introduce both Nancy and Jim, and then we're going to hear from them. And we'll then hear from Dr. Schaps, and then we can open it up for questions. And welcome to those of you who are watching this at home. Nancy Pearson is completing her second term on the board, the last 2 years serving in the positions of vice president and president, respectively. Nancy is seeking a third term to make use of her knowledge and experiences and to serve as a member to a relatively young board. She continues to be excited about education, the challenges and potential, and particularly cares about our district from which all three of her daughters have graduated. Nancy participated in the previous superintendent search and multiple contract discussions with the various bargaining units. She is currently liaison to the Hommocks Middle School and serves on the policy and audit committees. Prior to her terms on the board, Nancy was active in the PTA as a member who served in many roles, including co-president of SEPTA, Mamaroneck High School PTSA, and the PT Council. Nancy was a parent member on the Committee of Special Education for over 10 years, and within recent years, Nancy has volunteered as a reading tutor at the Hommocks Middle School. Nancy grew up in Pennsylvania, attended Colgate University, and has a master's degree in communication disorders from Emerson College. She's lived in Larchmont with her husband Frank and family for 20 years. Welcome, Nancy. Jim Needham is going to bring a formidable financial background to the board. Jim and his wife Leslie have lived in Larchmont for 37 years. Their daughter went to Central, Hommocks, Rye Country Day School, and then to Brown University. And their son went to Central, Hommocks, Mamaroneck High School, and then to Yale, which says a lot about preparation from the Mamaroneck schools. Believing that changing needs of the marketplace and the skills needed to compete in the global economy should be the drivers of our district's education strategy, Jim believes in his business background and life experience will provide a positive perspective to the board. Jim founded Fieldston Investors in 1989, and prior to starting Fieldston Investors, he was a partner at Arthur Young & Company, Ernst & Young, where he was National Director of the Mergers and Acquisitions Group. Prior to Arthur Young, Jim was Director of the Business Development at Corning and an auditor and consultant at Pete Marwick Mitchell in New York. Jim has had a career in private equity, investing, and advising middle market companies. Jim is chairman of SPC, the nation's leading manufacturer of passive heat dissipating enclosures for last mile application for the telecommunications industry. Excuse me. You'll have to explain about that. Jim serves on the board of Stone Source, a leading distributor of high-end natural stone, ceramic, glass, and metal tiles, engineered stones, and other decorative surface products sold through architects, designers, and contractors. And he's also on the board of HOFCO, a provider of wood accessories to the cabinet industry. Jim has been a guest lecturer at the Fordham University Graduate School of Business, and he co-founded the Park Avenue Bank in New York City. The bank was sold in 1989 when he founded Fieldston Investors. Jim Needham has a BS in accounting from Fordham University and is a certified public accountant. Welcome, Jim. Nancy, I'm going to pass the microphone to you.
So thank you. I had actually written a few notes, and Beth has given most of them. So I don't have much more to introduce myself. To say it's been 20 years. My kids went through the schools. I was in the PTA. The board was kind of the next step. The 6 years that I spent on the board have always been challenging and stimulating. The board members that we work with, meeting the staff that we work with. But it's really, I think, getting out to places like this, our coffees, our PTAs, getting into the community is, I think, what one of the major jobs of the board is, because what we do, and Jim will find out, is really represent the community. We leave the education to the educators. If we talk about what a board does, our two jobs are to set policy, which we have this big, huge policy book, and to hire the superintendent. And that's, those are important jobs. But what we have to be doing is always listening. And it's hard sometimes to know what you're listening to. Are you just listening to the loudest voices? Are you listening to the voice of the community? And how to engage people more in the discussion about education. And I think our board has been particularly active in trying to get out and trying to always be listening. So that's just, we talk about what the challenges are. And then, on the other way, Debbie Minette is here, and she's our public information. She's done an amazing job using all social network, using meetings, and we now have, LMC does a great job. We now have where you can write in questions during the meeting, and we respond to those. It's just, it's a struggle. So that's you're going to hear that over and over. With the questions coming in, we do probably get a few questions each meeting. Obviously, our hot topics, we get more. It gives us the chance to try and sift through them if we see the same question coming in over and over. We know that's something we need to address. I hope it's something that people pick up on. We know people aren't getting out to the meetings, and we know we all have a lot of things to do. But we do, I think people are watching them on LMC, probably the same as your town meetings. I mean, people show up when they have an issue, but for the most part, we have other things to talk about, so that's good. I guess the other thing I was asked to talk about was what are we most proud of, and there's, new initiatives that come along over the years, but I think what I'm most proud of is really, and it's thanks to Bob, it's thanks to Paul Freed before him, that we've put budgets together that are responsive to the times, that maintain the education. You're going to hear about this one as well, which just becomes more and more challenging. Thank you to our state. Thank you, Steve and George. And so the fact that we've been able to do it up until this point is something I'm proud of. It is something I'm not looking forward to in the future. It's going to become more and more challenging. And the last to say is we have a board of 7 people. We come from various backgrounds. We have various expertise, and having 7 on the board has been wonderful. It is, and always has been a very tight board, a very respectful, collegial board, and we take advantage of what everyone brings to the table, and we are looking forward to Jim coming as well. So if there's no questions or anything, I'll just pass it off to Jim. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I have my wife Leslie here and my daughter Christina, and you've heard their backgrounds, or Chrissy's background anyway. I've been told I have 5 minutes to give you my life story and what I think on my policies on education and what my views, etc. And I'm welcome to the league's form of speed dating, I guess. I was selected by the selection committee to run. I asked to run by a few members on the committee, and I decided to do that. But I had not been active in the school for a while, so I decided to inform myself about it. And I spent a lot of time reading about the school, looking at the public documents, etc., etc. And I was surprised to find out what I didn't know, and surprised to find out what bad shape the situation is. I wrote a 4,000-word presentation to the selection committee, and I've got 7 sheets of Excel spreadsheets documenting a lot of this information. I'll be glad to send to anybody. If you just send me your email, and my email is jm, as in James Michael, _Needham, NEEDHAM, at msn.com. I'll be more than happy to give you that. Since I only got 5 minutes, just let me say a couple of things that I think are important. And I'll just, if you walk away from this session with anything, just remember the word 6. And 6 is, I found out that Dr. Schaps, I asked him what he controls in terms of the budget in this school system. He said about 6%. And that surprised me. and it's probably not even 6% because I don't think the Con Ed bill and the telephone bill and the gasoline for the trucks are discretionary items. The other 6 is that when he finishes here and he goes back and he gets the budget approved on May 21st, he's got to deal with next year. And he estimates there's going to be a $6 million increase in funded or non-funded obligations that we've got to meet. That $6 million is only going to come from one place, and that's cutting programs. The tax cap has placed some limitations on us, and I'm not sure these residents, given what's going on in reassessment of tax assessments, they're anxious to step up to the plate for much more. I've attended every public session of the board since I was asked to run for the board. And I experienced I look forward, I guess, to the coming year of what I've seen this past year. The cuts are going to be horrible. The first group that came up was the elimination of the busing for private and parochial schools. If that's eliminated, that's only $1 million. We still got 5 to go. I didn't join the sport to see my neighbors coming in, fighting with each other over what cuts are going to be made and who's going to cut, and the kids fighting with everybody else. It's going to be terrible. It's a cancer in our community. And the factors driving this are 2, primarily. First of all, of a $127 million budget, $100 million of that, 80% goes to salaries and benefits. That's out of control. We have a defined benefit program, the contribution program, that has significantly gone up 88% in the last 3 years. And we're getting assessed for that. If we didn't have that, the school board would be in fine shape, but we don't have the power to deal with that. So I think if you've got to focus on, and I'm glad the county legislatures are here today because they're the only people that can correct this situation. You've got benefits which amount to 55% of salaries. I know no business that has that other than the public service area. It's outrageous. The defined benefit contribution program is unfair, and it taxes the residents of the community at a time when they're suffering financial reverses as well. And let me tell you how that works. If you have a 401k program, and in 2008, you suffered a 30-40% decline in your value of your 401k program, wouldn't it be great if your employer said, don't worry about it, we're going to make you whole. And on top of making you whole, we're going to give you 8% earnings every year for that. That's a great deal. Well, that's the present deal on the table right now. So when you're suffering your 30-40% loss, you've got to make up for the deficiency in the pension program. There's something wrong with that. Doesn't make sense, and you can't base a business on that or a school district on that uncertain hits. You can't somebody rolling along a $127 million budget and then get socked for a $6 or $7 million assessment for the pension contribution. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, I've got a lot to cover. I would like to talk about blended education. I don't have that time, but I think Dr. Schatz is doing a great job in terms of addressing the issues and the impact that's going to have on K to 12. The fact that we have algorithms and all that stuff in history, there's no way that we can measure a child and teach them one-to-one. When I went to school, or when our kids went to school, everyone was complained about teaching to the middle. Today you can teach to the child if you have the right technology and the right assessment of that child, and you can measure the child's progress. I think we have in the school system an opportunity now where you can track a child in terms of bulk, massive data. If a child's got a 73% score in math or English in the 4th grade, and you've got his grades for the first 3, you can probably track and say, everything being normal, the kid will probably wind up at a certain grade level at 12. Well, it seems to me then that a teacher can sit down at the beginning of the year with her supervisor and the child or the parents and plot out Johnny's schedule for that year. And this is what's happening now in education. It's going to happen faster and faster, and the information that's coming over the transom will enable teachers to be more coaches than standing in front of the classroom. Nothing's changed in education much over the last couple of thousand years. When Socrates taught Plato, it was one-to-one under the Socratic method. When Plato taught Aristotle, he finally went to the written word and combined teaching and that and writing. And then we went to the Middle Ages, the movable type. And since the movable type, nothing's really happened. It's been the teacher in front. It's been the teacher in the front of the classroom teaching away. Today, What's the internet and the software developed for it is revolutionized it. I heard a fantastic statistic the other day. University of Pennsylvania has 500,000 students taking online courses. 60% of them don't even live in the United States. MIT last year had a course in circuits, the elementary course in computer science. 155,000 students signed up for it. That's more students than ever attended MIT in its history in 1 year. So you can see, and that's all coming down to K-12. And we have to be ready for it. I understand Dr. Schaps is making moves on that, but without the money, we're going to be left behind and be the functional equivalent of the post office. And I don't want Dr. Schaps going postal on me. So the issues here and the solutions to the problems we have is really relies on the state legislature and the governor's office. Without that, we're just going to have 1 year after year of students and parents fighting with each other, and it's a cancer in our society, and it's not going to prove beneficial. I've just read some public information. I hope to have some more in detail information as I get elected to the board and find out some more information. But I'm shocked to find out what I've learned. And again, if you want the information, it's jm_Needham@msn.com. Thank you.
Jim, thank you. We will have time for questions afterward. Well, that's a sobering introduction, but this is the kind of thing that the League of Women Voters is suited to try to tackle. You know, we've got some very real fiscal challenges right now. We've got very dedicated public servants in Senator George Latimer and Assembly Member Steve Otis. We have open communication. We've had open communication with our county legislature to the extent that that is applicable. George has brought up issues with respect to Medicaid, for example, and how we fund that. We're looking at legislation. And after Dr. Schaap speaks, if we have some opportunity, we can have an open discussion about what we might be able to do in the coming year to not just accept that this is a fait accompli, but what we can do to try to head it off at the pass and figure out if there's a way to strategize to not cut programs, et cetera. On that note, I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Schaps, who's currently serving his third year as superintendent of Mamaroneck Public Schools. How's it going? How you doing? During his tenure so far, Dr. Schaps has worked hard to restrict budget growth and hold down the tax rate while continuously improving to improve the quality of Mamaroneck's educational programs and teaching. Among other things, Dr. Schaps has brought a new data tool to the district that enables teachers to analyze student progress and performance and adjust instruction accordingly. I think this is what you were referring to. Implemented a new system for evaluating programs and placed an emphasis on professional development for all teachers. Under Dr. Schaap's leadership, the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, made up of community members, has been instrumental in budget forecasting and working to develop a multi-year financial plan for the district. Today, Dr. Schaps will talk to us about the 2013-2014 proposed Mamaroneck Schools budget. Please welcome Dr. Robert Schaps.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to say it's great to start the breakfast with just an opportunity for our current board president to talk about her, I think, leadership and membership as part of a 7-member board, and certainly Jim's interest to serve as a volunteer and a trustee as well. And I would say that this is a unique co-governance model, and it works well, and I certainly appreciate the full-time volunteerism that takes place as part of being a board member, Board of Education. I'm going to kind of keep things on a positive note because I like to think the glass is always half full, at least. You know, you should have in front of you a flyer, just a 2-page kind of summary of the 2013-14 proposed budget. It begins with this kind of statement of maintaining excellence. I think it's more than just maintaining excellence, and I think, as Jim had mentioned, and certainly Nancy, the challenge we face is how do we maintain and innovate? How do we ensure the quality of our programs and the breadth of experience in our schools but also think of innovative ideas in this, what I would say, fast-changing, not only global world economy, but also this technological age. I want to also make a point that Senator Latimer and certainly Assemblyman Otis have been leaders and working with superintendents in the region, across the state, to kind of confront the challenges, the fiscal challenges, but also to kind of lead the way in thinking about building a strong and competitive public education system. So I appreciate the partnership, the leadership, and their effort to advocate on our behalf. And that is not only just regionally, but certainly across the state. When we think about maintaining excellence, instead of talking about numbers, I'd like to start by saying, recently there's been a lot of attention to the U.S. News and World Report, all the polls around best schools. When I think of the success and excellence of Mamaroneck, I think about just in this year alone, some of the incredible things that students have accomplished each day in our classrooms and outside of school. We had 3 students recognized as all Eastern musicians. That is just incredible to have 3 high school students to be recognized at that level for their, I think, demonstration of performance as a musician, as a singer, and it certainly speaks volumes to our K-12 investment in our instrumental program, our band and our chorus. The other night I was at the Hummocks Middle School orchestra concert. There were literally hundreds of 6th grade students playing the violin on the stage. The stage, if you can imagine how big the stage is at the middle school, could in some ways not fit all the violin and cellists that were there, and the quality of the music was just exceptional. This year we've had several students recognized nationally for their original science research in the high school, working alongside of prominent scientists and researchers. We have had the longest standing public school Mandarin program, started in 1988, and this year for the first time our students stayed with high school students in Shanghai as part of our partnership with Shanghai Experimental School, able to use their language skills and demonstrate what they know in terms of what they've learned solely from being a Mandarin student in our schools from 6th grade up to 12th grade. We have a long-standing Shakespeare program. We have students participating in the AP program, and this year our senior class have had positive results in terms of certainly being accepted to what I would say is the highest performing colleges and universities in the country. So those are examples in my mind of this idea of excellence, but it's also through the commitment of ensuring that all students experience a broad educational experience, that they have what I would say is advantageous class sizes and strong relationships with teachers, that we invest in co-curricular and extracurricular activities. And in so many different ways, this budget has allowed us to put forth at least a commitment to excellence K through 12, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud of the fact that the board has supported that. At the same time, we are looking to innovate, and I think Jim mentioned technology. I was pleased 3 weeks ago to host Board of Regents Harry Phillips, who called me to come to our school to look at what we're doing with technology in the classroom. And I was most proud to take him to our 8th grade earth science teachers to observe our one-to-one initiative using iPads as a vehicle to learn earth science. And he was quite impressed, and he was asking how can we take this and move it to scale across the state, knowing how technology plays an important role not only in the classroom but outside learning that takes place outside the classroom. Part of the budget this year is our investment in thinking of how to, in some ways, maximize or leverage technology for learning, to redefine instruction and how kids learn. In the budget, we've proposed doing a one-to-one deployment of iPads for all 8th graders and 9th graders. And we have started down the path of really thinking about what learning looks like from 8 to 3 and from 3 to 8, around this idea of the flipped classroom and making information available to students. So when you talk to students at the high school, it's not uncommon for 5 students to Skype in the evening to work around of solving a physics problem and to share information and then come back into school and present their ideas. So it's reframing this thinking about teaching and learning. At the same time, we are certainly looking at the responsibility we have to fulfill the transition to the Common Core standards and really invest in professional development throughout the system to help teachers situate their thinking about how to deliver new standards at grade level and how to help students in some ways build their competencies in mathematics and literacy that looks very different from years past. And so within this budget, it is supporting those initiatives by having high-quality, sustained professional development, and we're very proud of that. And the board had the opportunity in the last several weeks, and will continue today, to visit classrooms to see what students are doing around mathematical thinking, around literacy, around really absorbing, I think, the demands of the new Common Core standards and preparing our students for the future. I want to talk about some other highlights of the budget. From a perspective of the numbers, we are growing our budget by $3.9 million. It is actually $1.1 million under the allowable tax cap limit. We are one of the few districts, I believe, in the state that for 2 years in a row have presented a budget to voters that meets our, I think, commitment to deliver sound education, but is certainly responsible in understanding the financial climate and the pressures that we face. Last year, the current budget, we presented a budget $1.5 million under the allowable tax levy limit. This year, 1.1 as well, and that's going to become increasingly more difficult, as Jim had mentioned, in the coming years. That translates to a budget increase of 3.16%. At the same time, we are using our reserves in terms of fund balance to invest in our infrastructure. Jim mentioned the challenges of unfunded mandates. The Commissioner of Education has mandated that by 2014-15, all students will take their state assessments, regents, in grades 3 through assessments online. And that has required us to invest in improving our technology, our infrastructure. And so in this budget, we're actually doing a one-time transfer of $750,000 to create a redundant server room with the hummocks that will provide for the disaster recovery, but also to ensure that we're moving a step closer to having the bandwidth that is required to allow students to take online exams. At the same time, we're committed to ubiquitous wireless and trying to think again how we can harness technology to individualize learning, as Jim had mentioned, and to differentiate and bring technology into our district in a positive way. At the same time, we're certainly mindful of the fact that it is about finding efficiencies and also savings. And so this year, through this budget, we were able to fund and support the energy efficiency grant, which has and certainly already benefited the district and taxpayers insofar as we've been able to make energy efficient improvements, whether it's through replacement of windows, looking at really every way, both short-term and long-term, that we can find savings to reduce the cost of utilities. At the same time, this year, the board revisited our facilities use policy to understand the costs associated with opening our buildings to the community so that we can support activities during and after the school day and on weekends. And part of our effort was to present a revised fee structure that we feel will bring in revenue and in some ways that is respects and encourages use, but understands the obligation to at least pay for the cost of opening and maintaining our facilities. A couple other highlight programs that I just want to mention. We are in the process of rolling out a dual language program, for kindergarten program at MAS. We've really studied the research about dual language, and so we're hoping that by piloting in the kindergarten at MAS a dual language Spanish-English program, that we will certainly support proficiency in bilingual learning so that students will become proficient in reading, writing, and thinking in both Spanish and English and continue to build that over the next several years through the elementary grades. At the same time, over the last 2 years, we've had incredible investment in technology and how STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics learning supports overall student thinking. This year, for the first time, our students, I think we were probably one of the few public schools in New York State, are using 3D printing as part of their technology class. And if you don't know what a 3D printer can do or looks like, using design software, our students now can actually create a 3D object that is designed individually through software that can do much anything. So you can design a 3D product, and students right now are designing 3D race cars that are used as part of the study of acceleration in physics. They're using their design techniques to actually design a 3D mobile phone cover. And at the same time, in the high school, we've extended our technology program to include computer science. And so we've had a strong interest in our introductory computer science program. Some students are taking advanced placement computer science this year. And at the same time, next year, through this budget, we're going to add a robotics course and an app design course. And so today, we actually have someone who is a leading marketer of app design in terms of e-commerce, speaking to our computer science students. And next year, the hope is that each student will have an e-commerce mentor, and students will work in teams to develop an app that they can in some ways offer to either the community or to the community at large in terms of understanding from a design feature, from a computer science software background, and then a marketing background, how it all works. And we're very pleased with that opportunity. We certainly are looking to continue to grow our STEM courses and electives, knowing how important that kind of area study will play for students in the future. We recently had the opportunity to host Dr. Young Zhao, who is a professor of Oregon, but is a leading kind of proponent of entrepreneurial education and education for the global age. And our next step through this budget is to think how we can define authentic opportunities for students in the classroom and outside to think about problems in our area and in some ways learn from doing. And one of the things I want to mention, and I certainly want to recognize that we're in the process of writing a grant through State Farm for the Rocket, which is a composter, in the hopes of that middle school students could audit and really take charge of food waste and waste products, all paper products, to produce what I would say local compost. And we think the idea of being able to cut down and certainly support the reduction of trash and garbage from the municipal side, but also help students really understand the importance of sustainability and then give back to the community is a great way of thinking about authentic learning. And so we're excited by the promise of opportunities like that. So overall, I would say that in terms of this budget, we began the process by saying, how can we maintain the programs and the experiences we have? How do we ensure that we are improving the quality of our district, preparing students for the new Common Core? How do we stay true to authentic learning and to build on the opportunities of sending students to New Hampshire to work as part of their government course in a real campaign? And other opportunities that are authentic learning, at the same time remain fiscally responsible to our taxpayers. I do believe it's about reframing teaching and learning. It is about thinking about the future, not 5 and 10 years out, but thinking immediately how we can transform this thing called public education and ensure that our students have the greatest opportunity as they leave us as thinkers, as doers, as problem solvers. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I personally want to thank Dr. Shaps for many who are here and people listening at home. You know that this year the League of Women Voters has been devoted to a community conservation civics initiative that dovetails with the sustainability goals of the town of Mamaroneck. And, in my capacity as president of the League and also because of my devotion to conservation, have been encouraging people to conserve what we consume. And reaching out to the schools is really central in all of that. And I've been graciously welcomed on a couple of occasions by Dr. Shaps, and we've had face-to-face conversation, which I think is really a key to where success builds in a community. We live in an internet society right now, and being able to sit down and have a face conversation actually results in synergies that would not otherwise happen. And I want to give one very important example. One is the Rocket. I'm organizing a trash and show at the high school where we're going to have middle school and high school students model outfits that they're wearing. We're going to be taping it at the Mamaroneck High School studio. And our town supervisor, Nancy Seligson, our state senator, George Latimer, both of them who are here, and Robert Shapps are going to judge the best outfit, but also will be speaking about what they are doing to help manage our waste. Because if we look at our budgets, in many cases, we're buying our food and then we are paying to cart it away. And that's what's happening in the middle school. I had this discussion with Robert Shapps, and he mentioned the rocket, and I did the research, and he took the ball, and whether or not we can afford it is a different issue. I think we're looking at the Mamaroneck Schools Foundation, but I think if there is a will, there is a way, and we can figure out if we can compost this, we can teach our children the value of not throwing things away. We don't have to pay for it twice. And if we can compost the gardens that they're growing at the high school, they can understand the full life cycle. Another example, though, is we have a new Marine Center that's just opened up at Harbor Island. And I was at a meeting with Sarah Evans, who is on the Village of Mamaroneck Committee on the Environment, and Dr. Shapps. And for those of you who know Sarah, she's been a champion of the environment. We were on the Water Quality Committee together. And she and her mother were really responsible for spearheading cleaning of the Gloucester Bay years back. And Dr. Shapps spent earlier years in his career in Massachusetts. So this conversation came up, and Dr. Shapps said, we love the Long Island Sound. It's a treasure. Why wouldn't we be able to involve our students here? And we said, wait a minute, they're opening a Marine Center. So this is where wonderful things happen. I mean, Nancy Seligson's here. She's been a champion of the Sound for decades. If there are ways that we can work together with our students to involve them, this is where we create excellence for our next marine biologist or whomever it might be. And so I just give you those as examples. This is what community does when it works well. And I want to open it up to questions now and give our people an opportunity to speak. Is there anyone here that has a question? Let me just bring you the microphone.
How are we doing on getting relief from mandates? Maybe you and George and Steve can talk about whether there's any. I mean, we talk about it every year, mandate relief, mandate relief. Where are we?
I'd be happy to come on. Certainly turn it over to our elected officials. I'm very proud that as a regional group, the superintendents of the Lower Hudson has worked closely with actually our counterparts in Nassau and Suffolk County. 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, when the governor put forth the kind of charge to think about mandate reform, the superintendents really got together and just research across the board for opportunities for mandate relief. We actually created a white paper and sent to the governor directly a list of mandate reliefs that could have a huge impact on the schools in terms of reduction of costs. And we continue to work locally to truly advocate for some significant changes to some regulations that would provide relief and mandates. At the same time, I think we've been vocal in showing and pointing out that every time Albany or the governor puts forth an unfunded mandate, it really falls on local municipalities in terms of finding, in some ways to pay for or cut in order to pay for these mandates. And so we have actually tried to engage parents and community members through local campaign of writing letters and to really kind of in some ways energize taxpayers to understand that we are part of the solution, not the problem. That give us the local control to really and hold us accountable to high standards. Give us at least the courtesy of understanding the type of mandate relief that would provide for some significant savings to school districts, and let us sit at the table. And I think I'm most proud that parents and community members, PTAs in the general Westchester area, have worked hard to write letters to Albany to really start to say enough is enough of the mandates. Unfortunately now, with the APPR, our supervision model, with state testing, the commissioner has now put additional mandates on local districts, and certainly that translates to additional costs. I'll give you a short example. With the responsibilities requirements for supervision of teachers, some districts in the area have paid upward to $100,000 to purchase third-party tests to test students on things they know they won't know in the beginning and then test them in the spring. We have avoided that additional cost by using actually our data mine of historical performance in students as a way to leverage and meet that requirement. But that's a small example that in 1 year you are obligated to spend $100,000 for tests to meet this new system of mandate requirements for supervision. It puts added pressure on school systems and municipalities. So we're all for mandate relief. We are certainly all for having our local citizens advocate for. We just need really help from Albany to make it happen.
Sure. Well, I guess on mandate relief, there's bad news with new requirements. There's good news, and then I mean, over the last number of years, there's usually what I would call small ball mandate relief things. Some lessening in the education field of requirements, reporting requirements to SED and stuff. Not all mandate relief is like a giant chunk of budget. The biggest mandate relief in terms of taxpayers that occurred in this year's budget was an acceleration of the state takeover of growth in Medicaid. Medicaid is a county expense, but it goes on our property tax, and the state has been capping, minimizing the increases, and a few years ago the state said that they would cap the increases in 3 years, and they changed that to 2 years, which meant more money being transferred from the state to county governments this year to avoid tax increases. Not a school district issue, but in terms of what's been going on, quote, mandate relief or cost relief. That's one of the pieces of the pie. For school districts and for the agenda of the school superintendents, and George and I have been to many of these, on a lot of these issues there are barriers. There are constituencies on the other side of these things. So none of them are like simple snap your fingers and they will get done. The legislature did pass 2 years ago a Tier 6 pension reform, but because of the state constitution, pension reform only can occur for new employees. So the impact of that for current employees or for the current budgets is really minimal, only when there is new hiring. So over time, that's going to have an impact. But this is an issue that I know George and I are both concerned about working with. When I worked for Senator Oppenheimer in 2010, I think maybe 9, there were some good mandate relief things passed for school districts. Some of them were signed into law, some of them passed one house. It's an issue that we continue to track and try and do something on. So, George?
Thanks. Judy, the first thing, just to highlight, more probably for the people at home than the people in this room, is we use the word Albany and we lump together a lot of different decision makers. So let's be clear that the governor has his set of policies that he advocates, and he is far and away the strongest player in the game. And then you have the two houses in the Senate and the Assembly, and the different majorities in each house and minorities. And there are those of us as individuals who advocate for the things we believe in. Oftentimes, the overall policies that come out of the end result of the state, and by the way, the Board of Regents is a critical player in all of this, the Commissioner of Education. So there are a lot of players in the game. We tend to say at the local level, Albany, as if there's one philosophy that's going on up there. That's not true. I'll speak as an individual. I've been very critical of a number of mandates that have not changed. In fact, have gotten worse. I think Bob pointed this out in some of his comments. And I think the fundamental problem that we face is that to really overhaul the cost of all local governments, not just the school districts, but towns and villages, what you face in your jurisdictions and the county government, requires the state to take on more obligation, which, as an entity, I'm doing the exact opposite of what I just said, but state decision makers do not want to be able to pay for the decisions that we make, because it makes us look bad to say, well, our budget is going up and up. We like being able to say, as a group of people, we have held the line on state spending, and those policies drive the costs of additional things that we want to do down below. Steve is correct that this year probably the one good thing that we did was achieve some additional state aid over and above the governor's original budget submission, and that's helpful. But the underlying problems, Jim pointed them out in his comments, are still there, and they're going to be there until we can change a couple of fundamental things. Most importantly is that we've added to the unfunded mandates in the last couple of years. APPR, which I'm very dubious about as a non-educator, and mandatory testing, which I have a lot of deep concerns about. I'm co-author of a bill with Kathy Nolan to analyze the cost of mandatory testing. I think in both of those areas, we are taking on topics that in the general population, if you went into the rest of the diner and said, what do you think about testing school kids? They'd say, good idea. Let's hold them accountable. What do you think of annual performance reviews for teachers and administrators? Well, that's a good idea. But the cost of implementing these programs, I think, are additional added burdens that reflect in the budget that you have to adopt. Now, I think we pointed out, Nancy and Jim both did as school board trustees, that the personnel costs are the biggest piece. And the pension costs are the biggest piece. But the state sets the pension rules. We're the ones that say, here's how the fund is managed. We're the ones that say an employee is entitled to this and that. And frankly, I don't want to bash employees because all they did was follow a set of rules. If we're going to change the rules, then we're doing something fundamentally unfair at the state level. The problem is that the state has not said we've got a property tax problem at the local levels. It's not because the town supervisor, the county executive, and the school board isn't doing their job. It's because we, the state, have done certain things, and there's an unwillingness in some of our colleagues. And I would say on a bipartisan basis, most of the suburban legislators get it in both parties because we have the greatest property tax problem in the state. Our New York City colleagues do not face a property tax problem, and therefore they don't hear from the community when they go out into their diners what Steve and I hear when we come to Nautilus and Mamaroneck and Mirage or wherever else we go. And many of our upstate colleagues, while they have a property tax problem, have more of a not enough jobs in the marketplace problem. And so jobs are the #1 issue upstate, even though property tax is close number 2. So I think we've gone backwards in terms of mandate relief. And I think I cite what Bob cited, which is APPR and mandatory testing. And if we can, there's a certain, I know I'm talking too long here, but there's a certain cycle to which there is a political commitment. There's a political commitment to do APPR. There's a political commitment to do mandatory testing. Both of those are trendy, quote-unquote, reforms in the education field as defined by politicians in the last few years. We once had a commitment to whole language as a curriculum strategy, which at some point in time we stepped back from because it wasn't working the way it was supposed to work and so forth. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take a while before those people who got committed to the tax cap, committed to APPR, realize this is not going to get results. It just looks good, and then there'll be a rescission of what we've done in some fashion, or modification or reform at some point. I'd like to tell you that climate is today, but I don't feel it is, and I'm afraid that we're going to make it tougher for the school district rather than easier. But let's be clear, guys like Steve and I and other people, not just the two of us, understand these things. So when you say Albany, you can't slap the tag, I'm not you would say, but you don't slap the tag on all of us. Understand what each of us have advocated for individually and understand whether we are an advocate for your point of view or not.
George, just to follow that point, on the proposed legislation that would shift the portion of our property tax dollars that are going to fund Medicaid at the state level, I think there are 3 proposed bills. Could you speak to that legislation, where it is, and maybe what we might be able to do to advocate to push it along?
Well, right now you do have a bipartisan 2-house commitment amongst suburban legislators and upstate legislators to phase out the Medicaid mandate, which is a county mandate. Let's be clear. It's not a school district mandate. It is arguably the single biggest non-personnel mandate that I can think of. Maybe there's another one out there. But a non-personnel mandate, in round numbers, it's $220 million that the county government has to pay annually toward Medicaid costs in the state. They don't administer the program. They don't establish the program. It was a deal cut back in the 1960s. That $222 million probably equals about 40% of the total amount of property taxes that's collected by Westchester County. So on the day that you have phased out that cost, when that day comes, in theory, that could mean as much as a 40% drop in your county property taxes. And your county property taxes are more than your town and village taxes added together. That saying that, the governor has not been supportive of this particular plan. There is bipartisan support in both houses. It has not moved to a vote in either house, and that's where advocacy comes in. That's where people who go to the emails, and we'd love to get personally handwritten letters, but the reality is the emails work just fine. I see them at 2 in the morning. Steve sees them at 1 in the morning whenever we decide to go to bed, and or whenever Martha let us go to bed. I would say that advocacy to ask the state to reverse the cost of these unfunded mandates generically, and then using the specifics of some of the items that we've talked about today is fine. And generally, if the league were to advocate that amongst its members to generate those emails, that's helpful. I know, Steve has access to the leadership in his house, and I have access to the conference leadership in my house. And I walk in, stack of emails, kind of like this, and say, "Hey, the natives are restless. We got to do something."
How do our emails translate, and how can we actually target them so that it goes to the right? Because this really is a nub of an issue. I think it can translate into, am I correct that it can translate into more flexibility at the state, in the school, or not? Would it free up tax dollars? I mean, theoretically it would reduce, but maybe it might free up tax dollars that could be allocated elsewhere?
Well, I think that two things. George talked about the Medicaid, which is huge. That's $7 billion statewide, and George put his finger on exactly what the problem is. The state doesn't want to incur $7 billion more in costs there. But it shouldn't be. It never should have been on the property tax, and that was something that we're the only state in the country that does that. On schools and pensions, and for local governments, there's another bill that we both support, which is to say that any increase over 2% to your budget, any increase in the assessment from the pension funds, should be picked up by the state. And that's like the Medicaid pickup. That would really help school district budgets significantly. And the reality is the state also, the pension costs are really derivative of what's going on with the stock market. So state government and their employees, they have the same cost driver as local governments do, but the state, as George said, created the system. So for school district, and the state created the tax cap. So school districts and local governments, if they didn't have to pay the increase over 2% of the pension cost, that would be a huge relief to school and local government budgets.
You'll send those bills to me.
Sure.
And you'll send them out.
Okay.
If I can just say, to that point, one thing I didn't mention, I said that our budget is growing by 3.9 million. Our actual salaries are going down by 1.1 million, and thanks in part to a partnership with our teachers through a new contract that has a 2-year salary freeze. But at the same time, 3.4 of the $3.9 million is attributed to pension growth and health and employee benefits. And so it's eating up a large percentage of, as Jim mentioned as well, of our ability to grow. And we then have to find reductions in savings to offset that. So that type of reform would be significant to us, knowing that we keep hearing that based on the stock market, we'll see a decrease in the annual increase to pension, but we haven't seen it yet, and we're moving to a critical place.
While we're still on the pensions, I just want to ask a forecasting question, which is, given the situation that people are living longer and more people are retiring out of the system, and some of that may be forced retirement, or it saves school districts money to get higher step teachers out. With that increasing pool, aging population, what is the percentage increase of the pensions? If we cap it at 2%, it may be growing at a much higher rate. What is that? Where does that come from? How do you solve that problem? The disconnect.
We could ask Tom DiNapoli, who's both close to George and I, to come to one of these breakfasts and
He's coming to county luncheons.
oh, good. So you can ask him that question then. I mean, the premise is, if the state were going to pick up the increase over 2%, the pension would get paid on an actuarial basis the way it's supposed to, but the state has a broader source of revenues other than the property tax, which is the limit to what school districts really get most of their revenue from. So the state has a source of money that's broader to pay that obligation, but it is a legal obligation. It's in the state constitution, and so it's an actuarial thing for the state retirement system. There is a set of funds that is scored on March 31st of every year, and that determines actuarially what the assessment is going to be. I assume the TRS, the Teachers Retirement System, has a similar mechanism. I don't know if it's the exact same trigger or not, but it's math. It's not discretion. George, do you want to add anything?
Nancy wants to say
I just wanted to thank Dr. Shaps for pointing out what the burden is in the school system with the pension obligation, but it's the exact same system and obligation and unfunded mandate in the towns and in the villages and in the cities. So the pension and the library, whatever municipal district you want to look at. And so when we describe our budget, we have the same discussion that 80% of the increase in the budget is due to pension and health care costs, which means we have no control over it whatsoever. And that with a school where you think about how you need to innovate, renovate, and build, it's the same thing in a town. We need to renovate, we need to maintain things, we need to build new things. And with that kind of burden, it's very, very difficult to face those needs.
this gentleman, if you want to pass the baton.
I'm Jonathan Sachs, community member with 3 children in the school district, founding member of the CFAC. I sit on the selection committee, volunteer a lot within the district, and I'm a little concerned about some of the kind of negativity around the table, and would like to actually ask a question that I think we should all be addressing. We know that we have a challenging years ahead of us. If you think about the people that are in this district right now who are simply saying, I don't care. I'm getting an increased tax bill. I just had a reassessment. I've got these changes. And, I just want to vote no because I want to send this message that Albany's not doing their job, the legislature's not doing their job, the school district should just be sitting here and staying at a zero basis for increase. I would love for the group to address why it is that we need to support this budget, because I, as an intimate person who's gone through the line items here, who has spent years in analyzing this, support this budget. I support that people should be voting yes, and I think that the public needs to understand what it means if they were to vote no on this situation.
I'd be happy to respond.
I'm sorry, Keith.
Thank you. The reality is that the way things work under the tax cap formula in our budget, that the downside is if the budget were to go down, we would have to ultimately, if it would go down twice, reduce $3.4 million from the budget. Essentially, we're reversing back to our current budget, which would have a substantial effect on our programs, the experience we have. When you say, Jonathan, I think from my perspective as an educator, the strength of the public schools connects directly to the strength of the community. And when you have a top-performing, and I would think a broad-based educational experience in your community, it actually attracts people to want to live in your community. It maintains the quality of housing prices. I would say ensures a vibrant community. And so for us, the idea that a budget would fail and that we would have to cut programs, limit experiences, in some ways a spiral that we think is quite damaging. And so what we know now is that we've created budgets over the last several years that have averaged 1.6% budget-to-budget increase, well below CPI. And that at this point, if a budget were to go down, it would directly relate to, or the result would be, cuts to programs, higher class sizes, reductions in staff, that we no longer have any kind of latitude or ability to say, how do we maintain this if we have to lower our budget? So I do think that we certainly, as you know, over the last several months, we've looked at ways in which we can reduce the cost of the budget, and now we're at a point in our public discussions where it would directly mean, it would relate to cuts to program and experience of students. And we know that people have moved to the community to access the public schools, to be part of what I would say is a school district that offers, a vibrant and a broad program, and it would have, I think, not only a short-term but a long-term effect.
Blended education, again, as I said, is probably really nothing new. All it does is combine teaching in the written word and the visual word. And the advances have mostly been done in higher education, where you can take a famous teacher who can give her course, and then the teacher at the college can work one-on-one with the student. Now, to adapt that to the K-12 is a little more difficult. But schools are doing it. There's a whole, you look at Carpe Diem schools, they're doing this. And where the children all are taught by, you have them in a classroom and they all have workstations. And it takes the child who can learn fast, slow, and medium, and they can work at their own pace. And the teacher at the front desk knows how they're working and can troubleshoot with the students. It also incorporates a lot of outside experts and whatnot, or good teachers, and it praises good teachers. And this is all for really raising the level of teaching. The teacher now, instead of standing in front of the classroom, is a coach one-on-one with the students, as they can get the information from multimedia sources. And I look at this as one of the other concerns I have is that we have to reward our good teachers. And the only way to do that is to have some measurement. You can't do anything without measurement. You can't measure without data. And the way to do that is to take the students in the beginning of the year. And everybody agrees how they have to do it at the end of the year. And it's one-on-one. Once you have that capability, and you probably don't have that much of it today. But I see that as a fabulous opportunity where not only the student gets measured better, the teacher gets measured better, and you can pay the teachers better. I think one of the major problems in education today is that a bad teacher can damage a student more than a good teacher can help a student. And we've got to be able to have the flexibility to get rid of the bad teachers. And as we move forward to blended education, it's going to require good teachers. We have to step up the grade, require education for the good teachers. And that's in sum and substance what it is. It's a fabulous program, and I'll send that out in an email that was on Charlie Rose the other night, where he had the former chancellor of the New York City schools talk about K-12 blended education and what they're trying to do. And they have a little tablet the kids get and all that stuff. But we're in the elementary stages. But that's going to be coming down. But as the contracts come up for the teachers, we have to have flexibility built into them. And as we go down the road, we're going to have to build more flexibility into giving our teachers more of a chance to really reach their peak.
Can I just add, I actually, and I'm not sure if Jim's aware, we actually have been one of the founding districts, there are 6 founding members, to offer a blended learning experience. We have Nick Cucciarella, a retired teacher, who founded an architecture course that is a blended learning. So we have students from Bedford, Chappaqua, Mamaroneck, and Ossining, and a few others, that actually are enrolled in an online course that works in conjunction with Turner Construction. And students are learning about architectural design. They're meeting in New York City, touring real construction sites, learning the principles of design. One of our students from this experience was accepted at USC Engineering and worked for Turner, continues to work as an employee. We are now expanding that program to a second level course in design that really is a post, or at least a college level course on building materials tied with Turner Worldwide, and Nick Cucciarella, and offering that to our students. Out of all the courses in this consortium, it is the most popular and highly enrolled course the last 2 years. We've also designed an art history course online that is a blended learning that is going to combine online learning with experience in museums to really get an authentic experience. So to Jim's point, we've started down this path. We've been a trailblazer, and it's really worked well for us, and we look to expand it.
I have a question about this. When one looks at the context of having the Regents exams and the state-mandated requirements of our students, how this type of blended learning can fit into that context.
I mean, I think, that is the challenge. I mean, we still have, obviously, state requirements, graduation requirements, but it's how do we take courses that that culminate in an exam still to provide what I would say is authentic learning. A perfect example is what our AP U.S. government students, they have a final exam, a test that really defines the quality of their learning, but they spent 3 days in New Hampshire, 2 years ago, campaigning. So they combined, I would say, as a real experience tied to understanding what is the political system, how does it work, and then in some ways getting an authentic experience that translates to, I think, a broader experience of knowledge that it will help them on a test. So these are not absolutes, or they're not exclusive ideas. It's really combining the best of what I would say is deep learning, authentic and relevant learning with some form of assessment that will define what a student knows, demonstrates, and can do overall.
Will you tell us when we vote on the budget, when we vote for all of these things?
I believe it's May 21st is our budget vote, and also a vote for our trustees. Certainly, we encourage all of our community members to register to vote and to come out and vote for the budget and for the election. So thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming and best wishes, and I look forward to us working with you. To people at home, the League of Women Voters is going to be hosting Tom Anderson from Save the Sound next week on May 8th. Please visit us. And we're going to be taping a Trash and Show, which will show up on television sometime thereafter. We're currently scheduling our annual meeting with Assembly Member Steve Otis and State Senator George Latimer, and we will announce the date as soon as we confirm that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Don't forget to vote.
And don't forget to vote.